But you don't have the right to tell somebody, unless they're literally physically harming somebody else, you don't have the right to tell anybody what they can say. You have the right to judge them, call them a cunt, do whatever you want, right? But once you establish that as a power that the government has or that the platform has, then they will fucking weaponize it against you. Mm-hmm. Every weapon the government, the state ever builds will eventually be used against you.
Let's go.
Welcome to Citizen. We have a special guest today, Candice Horbacz. How's it going?
Good. How's it going for
Good.
you?
We're in your town. It's going well for me, actually. This is the only time of year I take off and do nothing for the most part. So a couple of days this week, I've done nothing. I like days when I don't have to leave my home or put my pants on.
I don't have many of those days.
Well, you have children, so
Yeah.
you can't.
So pants are usually required.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
What are your kids up to?
Right now?
Yeah. What are they into right now?
Harry Potter.
Okay. Well, that's because of you, right?
Yeah, but that's the whole point. You have kids and then you influence them to like the things that you like so that you can enjoy them all over again.
I see. Oh, that's actually
very selfish.
Yeah, that's it. Well, no, that makes sense though. There's not what's I don't even know what's out there for kids these days. I talk to Ross about it sometimes, and he's like, even on YouTube Kids, you have to pay attention because there's a lot of weird shit on there.
Well, yeah, they'll have these weird rabbit holes. So they start watching a video on maybe like these two indigenous people building stuff out of clay. Mm-hmm. And you're like, that's fine. But then all the suggested videos kind of get weirder and weirder. I think the ones that are the most troubling that people probably wouldn't necessarily think are initially are the ones where you have they're typically foreign families for some reason, and they do like this ad-libbing. So it's kind of how the Asians would do the video where they talk and it doesn't really line up with the words. But the kids, like their behavior is really shitty the whole time, and they're really like bratty and they're bossing the parents around. So it looks like just kind of funny, quirky videos. But if you actually look at the power dynamic between the kids and the parents, it's really off. And for some reason, my oldest like keeps watching those. I have to individually block each episode, and then they still pop up. So
you can't block the whole channel?
It doesn't work. I've tried it, and it still comes up. And then they'll have like other channels where they are featured. It's the algorithm.
Odd.
Yeah.
And what's the purpose of those videos? It's just clickbait?
I don't know. The kids like it for some reason. I don't know why. I never watched that, but that wasn't available when I was a kid.
What was available when you were a kid?
Like what was it? Darkwing Duck, like that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Fievel Goes West. Disney.
Fievel? Is it Fievel or Fievel?
Fievel, right?
I don't know.
It's been a long time.
It's a little mouse or some shit, right?
Yeah.
Why do you think he was going west?
What do you call it? Manifest Destiny?
Ooh, so now we're getting into the racism. You mean he was going to colonize the West?
Perhaps.
That's what you mean, okay.
Mm-hmm. Adventure, fortune, fame, all those things.
There's a lot of that going on these days. A lot of weird stuff going on in culture these days. And you talk about it on your show, Chatting with Candice, I believe it's called. Uh-huh. That's how I remember your name is. But what kind of stuff have you been talking about over there lately? Because it seems like there's been, it seems like things are turning around a little bit, or maybe just more people are aware of all the stupid shit that's happening.
Well, I went to a conference with Jamie, actually. So we had a huge back catalog of pretty much just relationship and sex stuff. So that was the last probably at least 8 interviews. And then we've been doing weekly episodes where it's just kind of a cultural and news update. And honestly, like, I feel like most of the stuff is calming down. Like, people are not afraid to admit to basic realities. Like, biology is a really good example. No one's scared to say, like, a man is a man, a woman is a woman. And even if you throw on a dress, you're still a man. So I find less stuff to be outraged about. And then I'm like, I don't know what to talk about. So people will send stuff. And then you go on InfoWars and there's never a shortage over there. So maybe just look at their news feed. But yeah, it seems like people are returning to normalcy.
Well, some people, the influencer class on the right they've made their careers being outraged by everything, and now they don't know what to do, and they just are manufacturing things to be outraged about.
Well, now there's a lot of infighting, right? So there's not a lot of stuff to be mad at the libs for. So now we were talking about the other day, which is James Lindsay's getting canceled because he came up with the term woke right, which no one seems to like. But it does make sense because people are taking the woke term too literal and saying, well, they can't be woke if they're on the right. And it's just, what he's saying is they're ideologically captured, right? And then that's the parallel. And it's that whole horseshoe politics that if you go to the extremes of both sides, there's really not any difference. So you see that with the influencers like Candice Owens on the right, just like you would with, Tim Pool. I would put him there too on the right compared to Kyle Kalinske maybe on the left. So there's really not much difference. It's just capture.
I don't think that woke right phrase has any meaning at all.
Well, what would you replace it with?
I wouldn't.
Then what would you describe the captured and really rigid people on the right? Kind of like the really Christian-based moral police, arbiter of truth, condemning everyone that doesn't fall in line to their exact belief system.
I mean, they're just idiots. This isn't anything new. This idea of, well, certainly not tribalism, right? Mm-hmm. That's not new. Mm-hmm. And then moral policing and moral panic, that's not new either. I don't know why you would, there's already labels for this worldview. And it's mostly the stuff that Lindsay's talking about is anti-Semitism and white nationalism, I think, right? I think that's the thing that is really stupid that people are focusing on, like America as a Christian nation, for example, mm-hmm. is a nuanced take if you explore it, because certainly we are heavily influenced by Christian values. There's no question about that. As was English common law, which we derived our system of law from. But the founders are quite clear that we're not going to have a national religion either, right? So I think people have, there's two different conversations going on there. One is that we are rooted in Christian values, and the other one is that we're a Christian nation. Those are two different things, right? But the zealot person on the right, seeing these recent victories, wants to have total victory now, which is not very constitutional, frankly, right? But mm-hmm. That's the point of the woke right, is to lump everyone who isn't a classical liberal, which is to say a modern conservative, into one group. And I don't think that's very effective, frankly. I think it's kind of silly. And he's been, again, this is a dude whose entire career has been defined by anti-woke, anti-communist, whatever, right? Mm-hmm. Whatever the fuck you want to say. So once you start winning victories, people don't know what to do after that. They have to create a new boogeyman. This happens in every industry, mm-hmm. right? Like you can, the easiest one to look at is the gay shit, right? They got everything they wanted. Mm-hmm. And it was like, oh, you know what we need to do? We need to get kids next. Mm. And everyone's like, whoa, what the fuck's this got to do with anything, right? The same thing with labor unions, we've reached, and the feminist movement, we've reached parity in a way that would be unimaginable to our founders at this point, right? One of the most egalitarian societies in the history of human beings. But still, there are women who walk around talking about how rough it is to be a woman in like 2024 in America. Like, dude, you have not been to any other country if you believe that, mm-hmm. right? I just think it's a problem that people, this is why you should, I guess, interlink yourself with ideas and not with people, because people will invariably take you down the wrong road at some point. I mean, I'll be wrong at some point about something. Mm-hmm. So no one should trust everything I say. I don't know when that's going to be.
Hasn't happened yet.
Certainly hasn't happened yet.
Well, so I guess where's the line between striving for perfection, though? And then maybe that's the thing. It's like striving for it versus demanding it, because I think when women complain, sometimes it's warranted. But I think this believe all women and everything that's happening right now with the Blake Lively and whatever her, the director slash, I think they co-produced that film.
I don't know what you're talking about.
What was that movie called? It Ends With Us. It's been in the news everywhere because, so it's about domestic violence, and it was like this kind of love story that everyone liked, and then they turned it into a movie. Blake Lively kind of just like fumbled all of these interviews and just came off as like a really mean, nasty girl. The male producer came off great and was like not taking any of the attention and saying like, we need to really just bring attention to this cause, and I don't want to make it about me. And I think what she did to take the heat off of her is she's now suing him for sexual harassment. She just had a baby 3 months before filming, and he has a back injury. So there's a scene where he has to lift her up, and he asked how much she weighed. And then she said that he was fat shaming her. So that's part of it.
This is in the movie?
No. This is all the drama that's behind the scenes. So she's coming out and like suing him and saying like sexual harassment, or fat shaming and all of these things.
Blake Lively is suing this director for
Yes.
asking how much she weighs.
That's part of it.
What a stupid bitch.
So yeah, and then I guess there was also
That's unfortunate because I used to like her.
Yeah, I did too until I saw a lot of her interviews coming out.
What a fucking you don't have bigger things to worry about. You're like generationally wealthy.
Well, that's all dependent on her brand, right? So if her brand is getting ran through the mud because she doesn't know how to do an interview, then this is a way to kind of get her back on top in a way. But I guess where I was going with that is so many women, especially in Hollywood, are jumping on her side and saying, you don't know what it's like to be a woman in this industry. And while there's probably a lot of truth to that, I've just seen so many women lie that I don't understand how it's a believe all women scenario now. And I admittedly go the other way, which is probably not good either. And I automatically assume the woman's lying. Like he's innocent until there's evidence.
Well, that's a problem with fundamentalism. There's no nuance, right? And we all get driven to it at some points. Like there were some terrorist attacks over the past couple of days, maybe more than one. We'll see how it all shakes out. But emotional reactions to things can be helpful in the physical world sometimes, right? If you're in actual combat or if your life is threatened, and that's what they're designed for biologically. All the blood rushes to your extremities, your endorphins rise, you're stronger, faster, more narrow focused, stuff like that. That's all good if you're trying to fight a saber-toothed tiger, you know what I mean? Or whatever, but it's not particularly good if it makes you irrational when you're making policy that's going to persist for 20, 30, 40, 50 years. Like 9/11, for example, people got super butthurt and allowed Congress to pass the Patriot Act, which is the most unconstitutional thing ever. And, you can drag that out even into the past week till we're recording this on Friday, January the 3rd. And the House is voting on a speaker today. I don't know how it's going to go, but Trump wants Mike Johnson. And the reason he wants him is so his election certification doesn't get interrupted. It has nothing to do with Mike Johnson's politics, which have been to the left, right? As a matter of fact, he and a coalition of Democrats are the ones that passed this last spending bill. It wasn't Republicans that passed it, even though they control the House. So, he's making decisions with himself in mind, and that's what happens when you're under great duress. People tend to get really selfish, and it's a biological instinct to protect yourself first, right? And that's something that happens. But yeah, you have to battle against that. It's not a very good. It's good for what it's meant for. It's not good for injecting into thought or policy or any shit like that, because the reaction is always the same. It's all we always overreact in one of two ways. Either we change our opinion about people or things when maybe it's just a minority group, right, of a certain subset that's doing this shit, or we allow some external influence to come in and I guess degrade our constitutional rights, which is what's been happening lately. And even yesterday there was some dickhole I don't remember. I think he's a congressman from Louisiana who's like, oh, we need more surveillance in our cities now. Like, no, we don't, bud. No, we don't. No, we should stop letting Muslims into our country for sure. Let's start with that. Since he was dressed like a member of the Nation of Islam, I don't think he would agree with that. But this is one of the things that Lindsay talks shit about, like about anti-Semitism and white nationalism, and I think it's the same myopic pigeonholed bullshit that the left has been pulling all these years. It's like, just because I don't want fucking people from these shithole countries coming into my country whose cultures are completely, I guess, incompatible with the West, right? Mm-hmm. Honor killings and the fucking shit that's going on in the UK right now, where like 1 out of every 4 girls has been raped by an immigrant. Now,
no way.
Yeah. It's like
1 out of 4 seems pretty unbelievable.
I think raped or sexually assaulted. Yeah. That's the latest data. Elon's been talking about this on Twitter lately. It's like, I don't want that in my country. It has nothing to do, like, I have friends from all nationalities, races, religions, and I've served in the military with these people as well, and they're fine, right? But it's about culture. Like, if we're not cultural matches, we shouldn't be hanging out together. Like, if you believe it's okay to abuse women and children, then I don't want to fucking be near you, and I don't want you in my goddamn country either. That's not racist. And even if it is, fuck you. I'm racist then. I don't care. Right? If racism saves my fucking wife and children's lives, then get fucked, right?
No, I agree. I mean, you have countless people that are qualified, good, contributing people that you could have come in. So why would you not be, sifting them to the top instead of accepting anyone that kind of comes in, whether it's out of convenience or whatever the reason is. I had Yasmin Mohammed on my show a couple years back. I don't know if you've seen her on X, but she's really great. So she speaks out about a lot of the issues with like Muslim culture and Islam, and she was explaining that in the UK, and not even just in the UK, she's in Vancouver as well, but a lot of Western cities where there's a high amount of immigration, that when these crimes are committed, because a lot of them are considered part of the religion, for example, female genital mutilation is a really big thing. I can't remember the number. It was really high. I want to say 13,000, but I could be totally off on this. It was the amount of young girls that were admitted to the hospital in the UK for this. And almost no one is actually being prosecuted because it's considered part of their religion, which is insane. Yeah. So at what point do you say freedom of religion, but also this is obviously illegal in most civilized countries?
Sure.
And then you can't prosecute them because then they get called racist. And that's, for some reason, that's scarier or worse than protecting a little girl.
Yeah, Epictetus said that if you want to improve, you must be okay with being thought foolish, right? And if you want to be safe, you have to be okay with being thought racist in this world. That's just the way it is. I couldn't give 2 fucks what these people think. Mm-hmm. And that extends to Christians as well. If the church, as it were, on either side, the Protestant or the Catholics, decided that, well, now it's okay to do this. Now it's okay to abuse this person or that person or whatever. No. Mm-hmm. Fuck you, right? It's none of your goddamn business what I do. And there's the old adage that your right to swing your fist ends at my face, right? It's a very good concept of what liberty is. Certainly you have the right to do whatever you want, provided you don't abuse or harm anybody else. Mm-hmm. And it's a fine line too, because, you could make the argument that because we all pay into a collective pool for healthcare, that somebody that it's abusing their own body is abusing the collective as well, right? So at what point do you draw that line? It's a conversation that needs to be had, certainly. But I think people are stupid. Mm-hmm. And lazy, and they want somebody else to tell them what to do. And unfortunately, and I say this a lot, and this is almost always the case, people that desire power very rarely deserve it, and people who deserve it very rarely desire it. James Lindsay shouldn't be in charge of anything, right? Because he takes people at the worst possible meaning all the time. He doesn't exercise the principle of charity. So, he's a zealot in his own right, which is ironic because all he does is talk about zealotry. You know what I mean? It's interesting to me. But that's how it is. Like, you're not going to get some balanced, nuanced guy is not going to get famous. Like Peter Boghossian has reached some level of notoriety because of the work he does, but he'll never become famous because he sits down. He's like, I don't think that's exactly right.
I feel like he has a pretty big platform now.
Yeah, he's
Yeah.
a decent sized platform. Yeah, but he's not going to be trending on Twitter anytime soon. He's not going to invent a term that everybody starts using. He lines people up and asks them thoughtful questions, and then he asks them why they believe what they believe, and then he explains his position, and then asks them again if they still believe what they believe, or if that. I mean, that it's a very drawn out process that requires time and energy, and people are not willing to do that. People want to be told what to think. Even if they say they don't, they definitely do. And you can tell, right? Like, there's a lot of excitement surrounding the Trump inauguration in the next 4 years of him in office. And the vast majority of people who would call themselves MAGA have no intention and no appetite for holding him accountable for the shit he did during COVID, right? For the vaccine bullshit, for any of it, frankly, right? They'll make excuses or they'll just simply ignore it. It's like, that's not, like, you should be way more concerned about your own side than the other side. You're not going to change the way Chuck Schumer and Nancy Pelosi think. That will never happen. And none of their disciples, to include citizens who vote for them, you're not changing their opinions. That's not how it works. Like, you should be trying to make your side better. It's an age-old maxim. You know, get the splinter out of your eye before, or what is it, the log or lumber.
It's like, don't point the splinter out in someone else's eye while you have a log in your, or plank in your own.
That's yeah. It's like this is thousands-year-old wisdom, and we just don't do it. Like, people are like, oh, you're even with the stuff that happened with Elon and Vivek with H-1Bs, which they were completely, the way they articulated that in a couple of posts on Twitter is the dumbest shit I've ever seen in my life. I
didn't see it. I just heard that they were saying that we need to bring more people in for tech jobs from India specifically.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't in any way define the problem in a way that would make sense to people. So H-1B is the most abused system in our entire legal immigration system, or the most abused part of our entire, like, people think it might be marriage fraud or something like that, like sham weddings to get in the country. Not even close. For legal processes, H-1B is the most abused, and it's not even close. They made the point that we need X, Y, and Z, highly skilled, which H-1Bs are not highly skilled. They're laborers, right, for the most part. Even in tech, they're laborers. What they didn't do, and to be fair, you have to understand the context of this. It is the most abused apparatus. There are people that buy, like, convenience store chains and then fucking bring in H-1Bs to be the clerk and manager at that place. Like, what the fuck are you talking about? I'm pretty sure a white dude can figure that out, or a black dude, or a Mexican that lives here, that's lived here for his whole life. We don't need to bring in random Indians to do that job. That's crazy. But we have 3 million jobs in STEM that are currently vacant right now, and we're graduating 750,000 STEM students per year. That is untenable. Like, we're in a race right now in AI computing that is as important as the nuclear race or the original space race, right? It is that important. Whoever wins this race is going to be the dominant superpower for the next 100+ years. That's how it's going to go. And right now we're behind. We're behind China. And as I mentioned, we're graduating a quarter of the people that we need to fill those slots. We don't have time to do that. So the question they should have said was, or I'm sorry, the statement they should have made was, we have 2025, maybe till mid 2026 to catch up and start doing this. What we need are grunt people who understand AI specific programming, which we're not doing a good job of producing right now. We need to get this done. So the question is this: how far behind are we? This is the way they should have articulated this. How far behind are we right now? How many people do we need to bring over here, and for how long to bridge that gap? And then how can we make more robust systems inside the United States so we never have to go through this again? So we have people standing by to do these jobs, right? That's the trifecta, I guess, of issues that they should have addressed. Instead of what Vivek said, which is, Americans are lazy and stupid, essentially, right? Like, if you're trying to, like, I agree with that to a large degree. There's a lot of lazy and stupid people out there. But there's a lot of people out there that don't even know that this is an issue. So how can you say something you didn't even know about is a blemish on your character? You know what I mean? Just articulated very poorly. But despite them spending the next several days explaining what they actually meant instead of the stupid shit they posted, nobody wants to hear that stuff. Everybody's like, oh, Trump this, Trump that. And then Trump's like, actually, I agree with, at the core of what they're saying. They're like, oh, yeah, I agree too now. It's like, what the fuck are you talking about?
So Trump agrees with Elon's position.
With both of them. The two positions that Elon has held for years now, by the way. You can find video of him in 22 and Trump in 21 saying the exact same thing, that H-1B is overused and abused, but also that we can use it the right way to get this stuff filled when we need to, right? They both agree on that. But just watching the roller coaster of people, like, immediate reaction, that's why I love Twitter. Even yesterday, with all the stuff that happened yesterday, it's like, oh, this guy's an illegal immigrant, fucking Biden administration. Like, no, just wait like an hour and see what happens. You don't get any points for being first on Twitter. But just watching the roller coaster of people, you can see where their alignment is, whether it's with reality and the truth or some person or party or whatever the fuck else. And I don't think the latter is healthy in any way, right? Because we can all be wrong.
Yeah, what I was told when everything was happening was with the H-1B was that they were bringing in C-suite level execs. And
That's not even an H-1B.
And that they were running these companies. They'd wait till the company got successful and then basically force them to go back. And then that was the issue. Is that they were being used. Yeah.
No, the issue, the main issue with H-1B is that, well, there's two. One is that we're bringing over people that we don't need to in the first place. And there is BLS, Bureau of Labor Statistics data that shows that the median salary for H-1Bs is lower than what their American counterparts might make. Now, it's illegal to offer them different amounts. But if you only hire H-1Bs for that specific position, then there is no competition, right? You don't have to, you use a baseline range for the rate. Let's say, and not entry level, but a base programmer for AI is going to make somewhere between $86,000 and $120,000 a year, starting in that position, right? So I carve out a very specific position, like AI engineer level 1, right? And I don't hire any Americans to do level 1. I just hire H-1Bs, and I can pay them all the base level, whatever the national average base salary for that is. I'll pay them that, and they never get a raise, right? If I hire an American, then one, their experience is going to matter, and two, they're going to expect graduated pay scale over time, right? I expect to get a raise after a year to 18 months or whatever. Well, that's not going to be the case for H-1B. So they end up saving a lot of money and displacing American workers. It's common in tech, not really in AI that much, but it's more common in jobs that there's no reason to even have an H-1B for in the first place, as I mentioned before. There are all these petitions for clerks and managers of like mini marts. Like, what the fuck are you talking about?
Well, do you find that those positions are really hard to fill, though, and that maybe there is a case for that? Because
that doesn't matter. That's not a reason to
bring anyone over.
No. That should not be a requirement, or I'm sorry, that should not be enough. You can't just bring your whole fucking Punjab family over here because you couldn't find a guy to be like, make your pay more competitive then.
Is part of it too, though, population collapse? So bringing more people in because of that?
I don't think the population collapse has reached, like, the birth rate is going to catch up to us in 15, 20 years maybe, but not now. Like the rate just dropped 10 years ago. So it's just barely hitting the workforce now. And these aren't entry level jobs. A manager of a chain like that. I mean, the manager of McDonald's makes $65 to $85K a year. Just one individual McDonald's.
Jeez.
Yeah. Because they make millions of dollars a month, all these places, including these mini marts that are selling fuel and shit. No. The high skilled workers or manager level people they're talking about, those are O&Bs. That's a completely separate thing. So even the fact that Elon and Vivek both use the phrase highly skilled in their statement is factually incorrect. They're not highly skilled. They're specifically skilled, but not highly. It's a difference, right? But again, the point of bringing it up is that they did a poor job of communicating it. And then people, of course, instead of saying, hey, are you sure this is what you mean? Because that doesn't match what I understand. They say, oh, you're fucking they're fucking leftists. Like, oh, great, man, here we go. And then we spent a fucking week and a half or 2 weeks where people, it's like shedding. Some people will never be okay with Elon helping out again, or Vivek. And one of the big turns is, if Vivek's just an Indian immigrant that fucking blah, blah, blah. Like, well, he's born in Cincinnati. So I don't know what kind of Indian immigrant that is. I mean, I don't like people from Cincinnati either. Gary's from around there. But, you know, it's just silly. Like this, one of the reasons I started the show in the first place was to try to get people to stop aligning themselves with politicians and political parties and even political ideologies and understand root concepts of things, right? How things actually work. Like if you understand basic biology, for example, you understand that what cellular shedding is, right? You understand that if you're an active person and eat well, your body doesn't have a single atom in it that it had 2.5 to 3 years ago. Not your brain, your teeth, your eyeballs, nothing. Not one atom is still there from a couple of years ago. You shed all of it. Okay, cool. What does it get replaced with? You're made of protein, right? We're carbon-based. You're made of protein. So the more protein you eat, the more nutrient-dense protein you eat, the more healthy you will be, because that's what cells do. They replicate.
Not according to this recent study.
There's no recent
on
study.
X.
No.
Yes, because they were saying what were they saying, that food and exercise aren't enough to lose weight?
Yeah, I saw that. Yeah, I think that wasn't on X though. I mean, somebody posted it on there.
Reposted it, yeah.
Stupid fucking article. Yeah, it was probably in the Huffington Post. But yeah, that's how your body works, and your cells replicate. It's like a stamp, right? Mm-hmm. And the stamp runs out of ink over time, and you have to put it back in the ink. If you're eating shit food, then you're replicating with bad parts. And that's what cancer is. Cancer is the replication of cells breaks down somehow and there's a mutation. And now it's all fucked, right? And cells start to die because of it. The more nutrient-dense protein that you eat, the healthier you will be for the rest of your life, right? Mm-hmm. Now, there are some additional complications you have to deal with, vasorestriction from whatever. If you're a big coffee drinker or you like nicotine or whatever, or sometimes it's hereditary. You may have constricted vascular system, and you need to do something about that. Good. Okay, now we know. Eat some potassium. Take dick pills. They work. Like that's the thing that they were originally. Viagra was originally going to be a lung treatment, right, for people with asthma.
Oh, I had no idea.
It opens up capillaries and makes you absorb more oxygen, right? Yeah, there's ways to deal with this stuff. An option that shouldn't exist is to not eat red meat. That's fucking stupid, but that was the truth for a very long time. If you have heart disease in your family or blah, 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 or this or that, if you're worried about a heart attack, you should not eat red meat. That's dumb. And a lot of people died because of it. A lot of people died because of it. A very basic understanding of biology could have prevented that from not just the individual from being harmed by it, but the collective from believing that stupid shit in the first place. We don't have that in politics either. We don't. It's not enough for people to understand why, or to believe in, let's say, the First Amendment, right? Mm-hmm. Like free speech. Okay, I mean it's a platitude at this point. What does that mean? What does free speech mean to you? You know what I mean?
I mean, I'm pretty much an absolutist with that, and then that gets me into trouble.
But why is free speech important?
Well, the minute that you can't criticize something, then, I mean, you're kind of under tyrannical rule, or like you're becoming a victim of violence. It's just a matter of time. Like if you can't call something out for being wrong, right? Or if someone's lying or committing a crime or whatever the case might be, it always ends up being political. So that's how communism started, right? Sure. You can't criticize the state, and then you start narking on your neighbors, and then it turns out you have to have a picture of the dictator in your house, otherwise it gets burned down. Like all of these things are the slippery slope.
Yeah. Correct. And one good way to tell, sometimes it's the way all authoritarianism comes to fruition, but it's harder to tell when we are in an alleged free society, right? Because people will kind of incredulously say, oh, what freedoms do you not have? It's like, okay, we have these public platforms, right? In the same way that Ma Bell used to be with the telephone service, that are the primary means of communication. And when somebody can restrict what I say on there and do so at the behest of a government agent, now we got a fucking problem, right? But in a society like these, like we're in today, and like the UK and some other places, it can be more difficult to tell. The way that you can tell absolutely is who are you not allowed to criticize, right? The government, right? Certainly, the science, and in the UK it's Islam. Can't say anything about Islam over there. The people are getting arrested. Old
For
dudes
memes.
are getting arrested. Like old men, retired dudes in their 60s, 70s, and 80s are getting arrested for having a sticker on his car or a meme or saying something.
Wasn't there a state here that was trying to pass something that if you had a meme that could be seen as inciting violence or the potential to incite violence, that you would be able to get arrested for that?
Yeah, I don't remember where it was, but that wouldn't pass muster. There's a Brandenburg v. Ohio is the Supreme Court case on that. It's very specific about what is required to charge somebody with inciting violence. However, in America, it's the institutions, right? The FBI, DHS, the government in general, and Jewish people. You're not allowed to say anything negative about them, and it's more bureaucratic here. It's less that somebody's going to show up at your door and complain about it. It's more that the mob is going to come after you, right? And that's what James Lindsay is part of. He's part of the mob now, whether he knows it or not. And this is why, like, people have to be allowed to be stupid and wrong, because sunlight is the best disinfectant, A, and B, bad ideas can only be defeated by good ideas. They cannot be defeated by force, right? Because trying to defeat a bad idea with force is an incubator for religious zealotry. Typically, that's how it works. They feel themselves as martyrs, and then they simultaneously feel as though they have no other option but to fight, right? And you've created a zealot where one needn't exist. It's fucking stupid. Now, back to the free speech thing. To really understand why it's important, you have to understand how we got here in the first place. There is this problem in modernity where people that have no idea what our history is are in charge of our future and current situation. A good recent example would be Kamala Harris trying to use price controls, right, during inflation. It's like, okay, no, every communist state that's failed in the last 25 years has tried that. Diocletian tried it in the 3rd century and fucked up the Roman economy. Like, it's always been bad for thousands of years. We know this. But she didn't know that because she's never read a fucking book. You can't read a book with a dick in your mouth, apparently. Although I would encourage you to try. Let me know how it goes. Send me videos of that, actually. Maybe she can just balance the book on her head. It's good for your posture, I've heard. At any rate, you have to understand that human beings had no actual rights. They had privileges, right? For all of human history, unless you were part of the aristocratic class, you only had privileges. There were no free societies. I mean, you could point to maybe Athens for a couple of years. They had a direct democracy, and that was it, like in all of human history. And then in the 13th century, Richard the Lionheart's little brother, King John of Robin Hood lore, I'm sure everybody remembers that, King John and the Sheriff of Nottingham, was forced by the barons of the north in England, when the French started to invade, to sign something called the Magna Carta, and it was a charter of rights, but it only applied to the barons, right, to the governors of areas. But for the first time in human history, somebody wrote down that the king didn't have complete control of everything, right? The leader of this country doesn't actually get to decide everything. We have rights as well. Now it was limited just to some people. Bounce forward a couple, let's see, 300 years, and you have the serf rebellion in England. And serfdom was a function of feudalism. You were a serf and a slave are similar. A serf is different in that they are owned by the land. So if you, let's say I own this building, and you're a serf, you are owned by the building and the building's proprietor. So if Jamie bought the building for me, now he owns you and the building, right? Different, but same, right? Now it was somewhat better. You were, I think in the 16th century, you owed 3 days of work to your lord, and then the other 4 days you could go work the fields for your own. It wasn't yours, it was his field still, but you could keep the crops and shit like that. But there were constant rebellions. One big one, I think, was in 1525. And not too long after that, I think 30 or 40 years after that, there was this group called the Levelers, and they wrote this document called an Agreement of the People. And it was the Magna Carta, but it applied to everybody. And it was the first time in all of human history that rights of common folk, everybody from the smallest person, I don't mean stature-wise, I mean small people, all the way up to the aristocrats had the same exact rights, right? Now, not everybody signed on to this, obviously, because it attacked the charter, but that was the first time in human history that it happened. Well, we jump forward into the 16th and 17th centuries, I'm sorry, the 17th and 18th centuries, all this stuff with Locke and Montesquieu, Locke property rights, Montesquieu separation of powers, stuff like that. These ideas start to become articulated. And then when our founding fathers went to high school and university, they would have read a book called The Preceptor. And it is all of this stuff that I just mentioned and more, way more, right? All of the history of how we went from slavery to freedom, essentially, right? And what that process was and why each step was taken. And that is what you have to understand before you can understand why this is important, because the one fundamental thing for me that comes out of that entire process is John Locke's articulations of the rights of man. And it is that the fundamental right is property rights, and the most essential property right is your own person, right? Mm-hmm. To do with what you want. And the basic function of that, the most important function of personal autonomy, bodily autonomy, is what you think. And if somebody can control what you say, they can control what you think. And that's evil. It's slavery. That's why it's important. That's why it has to be. That's why everybody should be a free speech absolutist. Free speech only matters when they're saying something you disagree with. Mm-hmm. Otherwise, it doesn't fucking matter, right? So that's why it's important to let stupid gay Nazis like Nick Fuentes run his suckhole on Twitter. Let him. I don't care. If I don't want to hear it, I can block them. Mm-hmm. Easy. I can block them. Not that big a deal. But you don't have the right to tell somebody, unless they're literally physically harming somebody else, you don't have the right to tell anybody what they can say. You have the right to judge them, call them a cunt, do whatever you want, right? But this is why it's all important, right? And here's the other side of that. There are some things that are so abhorrent that a lot of people, I would say a vast majority of people would be okay, like Nick Fuentes, a vast majority of people would be okay censoring him, kicking him off the platform entirely, kicking him wherever, kicking him out of the country, who cares? Once you establish that as a power that the government has, or that the platform has, then they will fucking weaponize it against you. Mm-hmm. Every weapon the government, the state ever builds will eventually be used against you. And we know that from these history books. So that's why it's important. Right? That's why. Now, we run afoul of this in our own world a lot. Like every day we run afoul of this. Man, as I mentioned, and you agree with this, we've talked about this before, free speech only matters when it is something you don't want to hear. Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? And that's a very tough thing for us. It's very tough for us to place our core political values above our personal offense for some reason. I don't know why. Mm-hmm. We're emotional creatures, I guess.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so when I have been going on Alex's show a lot, most people have been really cool about it, but there are some people that will say like he's degrading himself and that he's being a hypocrite by having me on. And one of the first things that I said when I met him was that there's actually a weird intersection because his position and kind of what took his character down or his public persona down was the Sandy Hook stuff. Yeah. And I see a parallel in the way that Larry Flint kind of like contributed to the First Amendment, which is you either have a free press or you don't. Right. So you can hate his mistake, and obviously it was a mistake with misreporting on Sandy Hook. You can hate pornography, but both of those things are protected under the First Amendment. And you'll get these people that, especially it's mostly on the right, but they pretend to be like patriotic or love the Constitution, but then they will kind of support something like Project 2025, which says anyone like myself should go to jail for the rest of my life. So that's kind of dishonest, right?
It's retarded is what it is. Like you don't tell me that you believe in that you're a freedom fundamentalist or a free speech absolutist and say something like that, because you're asking the state, which you hate, by the way. Like this is the dumbest thing that happens in modern conservatism. People whose entire ideology is defined by keeping the state as small and feckless as possible want to expand it constantly to root out things that they disagree with. Well, you don't believe in that at all then.
Right,
exactly. You're just a piece of shit, right? You're just an authoritarian that's too afraid to say that you are one, frankly. Right. And that's, I respect straight up authoritarians more than cowards.
Yeah, of course. Just say what you actually want and don't be sneaky about it. And then I guess when it comes to, you mentioned things like personal property, the right to free speech. It's weird now because the town hall or the public square is all digital now, but these are private companies. And it seems more and more that there is an oligarchy to some extent, or maybe to a huge extent. So at what point you're like digitally sharecropping right now? So it's the exact same thing. Like you're spending a decade building a brand, building a platform. This is your entire livelihood. And then you get demonetized, kicked off the network, even debanked in some cases for legal things. It's just for some reason they'll say it's like the Operation Choke Point, right? So if you're in CBD, marijuana, pornography, you can get debanked. You can get deplatformed, like Alex Jones was deplatformed up until relatively recently. Even Elon initially, when he bought Twitter at the time, didn't want him on because of Sandy Hook. So at what point are you kind of taking away someone's right to participate in society, but it's still a private business?
Well, we went through this before. I mentioned Ma Bell before. Ma Bell predated Southern Bell, which predated AT&T, right? So it was the public phone company. And at some point, the government and Supreme Court ruled that it was a public utility, and the phone company couldn't say, well, I don't like that this person voted for somebody, so you can't have a phone. That's not, you can't do that anymore, right? And at some point, we're going to have to cross that bridge when it comes to the internet. I live in Texas. They have a law which is held up in I think the Fifth Circuit right now, that would allow private citizens to sue social media companies and tech companies in general for political discrimination. It's held up in court right now because I think they're trying to better define what that means. Instead of having a bunch, like the alternative is to have a bunch of lower level case law come up to the Fifth Circuit and then have to adjudicate it there with a bunch of different types of cases. What they want is for the plaintiff's side, which is to say Ken Paxton, the Attorney General of Texas, to make an argument for what that actually means. So fair enough, right? But to the other point, we've always and will always be an oligarchy, frankly. And I think people need to accept that. You can't have a superpower without one. It doesn't work. People need capital to scale their business to achieve upward mobility. Unless you're a professional athlete or a creator of some sort or a musician or something like that, or an actor maybe, you need money at some point from other people, and it's almost always going to come from large institutions like banking or tech or something like that to scale your business to a point that's going to give you generational wealth, right? And that's what people want, and that's what makes our economy strong, is creativity and upward mobility. So the unfortunate reality is that the Rothschilds and the Rockefellers and people like that are always going to exist. Now, the thing that we need to do is keep them out of our institutions. Their money is fine because they're smart businessmen. That's how they got rich. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. They're smart. They got rich because they're smart. And it's a natural proving ground. The boardroom where you go sit and pitch your company idea, that's a natural proving ground. They're not going to invest in a stupid company, right? So you've got to refine your product and make it better, which, by the way, makes you and everything else around you better. And then you get the money and your business grows. But when you allow them to infect our institutions, to include government, now we've got a problem. For example, Henry Ford and Rockefeller reshaped American education. This is something that you fucking deal with all the time. Mm-hmm. Reshaped American education, and they didn't hide what they were trying to do. They straight up said, we don't want smart people. We want people just smart enough to work these machines, mm-hmm. right? Mm-hmm. And the entire American primary education system is designed to do that, to build compliant workers. Like when you, whatever you think of a good student, if you ask a teacher to define what a good student is to them, it's not somebody who's thoughtful and creative. It's somebody who's obedient, mm-hmm. who gets their homework done on time, which I think this is something Gerard and I have talked about for years. Homework is a bunch of communist bullshit. Teaching children that they still owe the man time when they go home, fuck that. Mm-hmm. That has to be done away with. But anyways,
I agree.
Sidetrack. But yeah, the entire elementary system is designed was designed to make compliant workers. Now it's just a bureaucratic mess, right? The fact that we teach foreign education the last 2 years of high school is retarded. Nobody at 16 and 17 is learning a new language. It's not how your brain works. You got to do it when you're young. This is what happens. They're trying to build non-competitors. They're trying to build lemmings, people who will run the machines, but don't come to compete with them. And what we need are people that constantly compete with the Rockefeller families. We need that, right? And without it, we get what we have today, which is flat wages, flat growth, and now a dipping birth rate as a result of that. Those are all things that are coming because of the economic stupidity, I guess. And that happens when you give people control over economic stuff that shouldn't have it. Mm-hmm. That's how it works, right? So we are an oligarchy, certainly. The goal that we should have is to funnel that capital and brain power into the market and not into bureaucracy. Because when it goes into bureaucracy, then the outcome is inevitable. The end. I say that at the end of sentences sometimes because it's not clear always when I'm done.
Well, but with the social media companies, they're already they're reaping the benefits of being, what would you say? It's a publisher, so they're not responsible for someone
Section
like Nick.
230, yeah.
Right, yeah. So they're not responsible for Nick Fuentes, but at the same time, they can kick you off and then you lose everything. You know what I mean? Like you can't do both.
Yeah. Well, I mean, another issue is, and it's happening on Twitter still. Elon's even made mention of it, that the algorithm is designed to, it used to be designed on Twitter to inspire as much outrage as possible. Mm-hmm. Now it's designed to react well to engagement, to positive engagement, based on verified accounts. And I understand why they're doing this. They're doing this to try to get the bots off, right? Twitter, to make it more valuable, right? I mean, this isn't altruism. Mm-hmm. Twitter is not altruism. Elon Musk bought this for the data, and the data is only good if it's real people and not bots. And when I say data, I mean for marketing purposes, but more so for AI, for his AI engine that feeds into Tesla, that feeds into SpaceX, all this stuff. It only works well if it's actual people. Otherwise, it's just basically AI talking to other AI, and you get feedback loops that don't make any sense, right? That's why they can't get the hands right. So I understand it, but there are consequences to it, right? It's just the way it is. And I don't know if there's an elegant solution to that. Facebook's algorithm or Meta in general on both platforms, their algorithm is so fucked up now. Like, you can get buried. There's 30 different blocks on our fucking Instagram, on Drinking Bros Instagram. We've talked to people that work at Meta. Like
blocks.
Yeah, so they have these buckets. It's like if you've ever done database engineering, it's just like a category that you can search by, and if your channel gets popped into one of those categories, you get X amount, like you get decreased by 10%, for example. We're in 30 of those, right? 30 different ones. Extremists, guns, booze, whatever else, stuff that they don't like. Even if you did have some kind of legal recourse for that, there's not a fucking law firm on earth that would take that case, because it would cost millions, like 20, 30 million bucks just to investigate that and find out how, and what if it was an automatic trigger? Can they be held liable for that? Right? What if it's AI doing it? I mean, technically they still own the company, but proving any of that is going to be impossible. So I don't know if that's even a fight worth having, to be honest. Like, how do you win that?
I don't know. Alex Bernstein, is that his last name? He was pretty successful. Yeah, he was successful with his lawsuit. He sued Twitter, and then he sued the White House. And I didn't think anything was going to come out of it.
Well, Twitter would be a bit easier because Elon dumped all those files through Schellenberger and Taibbi and people. That's easier.
I think
That's
it was
the
before
only one.
that, though, wasn't it? It was before
I don't know when
the sale.
Hold on, let's look it up. I can't spell. Twitter lawsuit. Bum, bum, bum. Yeah, it was in May. Well, it was adjudicated before May of 15. So when did Elon bought it? In August, right?
I don't know.
Berenson, not
Berenson.
Bernstein Bears. That's Berenstein Bears. Yeah, I'm just looking at the dates. This is definitely before Elon, so good for him.
Yeah.
I don't know how he got that information. He's probably somebody fucked up, right? And that's how Schellenberger and Taibbi found a bunch of this stuff through Freedom. Like before Elon even released Twitter files, I think Schellenberger was the one that found stuff through Freedom of Information requests from the FBI and DHS saying, hey, here's 40 accounts that we think are problematic. And that's a code word for censor these accounts. They had the conversations face to face. And then once he opened the Twitter files and saw like the Slack and IRC channels at Twitter, they were able to like, oh, this is a guy giving them orders. Like White House counsel is giving them orders to remove stuff. So that would have been easy. I don't know how, like, certainly we can't have that.
No,
but
so
they laid it all out. The Twitter files, they laid it all out. Now, fair enough that the Democrats were in control during all this, but they laid it all out, and it is criminal. It is clear violations of the First Amendment, regardless if this is a publisher or platform, right? It doesn't matter. The government was ordering private company to censor people. That is a violation of the First Amendment. There's no question about that. Not one goddamn thing was done about it.
right.
So I don't know if anything will be done now.
Probably not. Or ever. And then you have people that don't care. So when you were talking earlier about the Patriot Act, it's like, sure, that's a clear violation of like several constitutional rights, but no one cares. And if you bring it up to a normal person, they're like, well, go through my phone, listen all the time. There's nothing you're going to catch. They don't see the issue with it whatsoever. Same with TikTok. So people were asking, what's the issue with, and I'm guilty. It's on my phone. So we're all compromised in this room probably. But
this phone was built in China. Like these, I understand the argument that we shouldn't be giving China any more of our data than we have to, but that ship has sailed. But like, I don't.
Everything's being sold, right? It's not just TikTok. Everything on Meta, X, it's all.
Yeah, I don't
it's all
believe
out
in
there.
that. And by the way, Trump has asked for a stay with regard to TikTok being banned until he gets into office and can re-adjudicate this. And I think one of the reasons is probably selfishness, frankly, because all of a bunch of platforms were censoring stuff, and for some reason TikTok wasn't. With like a lot of people, so people my age and older get a lot of their news information from Twitter, but people that are in their 20s get their news information from TikTok. And it's basically just people who read news on Twitter and then make short videos on TikTok explaining what they've read, but still it's just a different medium with the same information. So, I mean, I don't know. I understand the idea of trying to get it sold to an American company, like Oracle tried to buy it and that fell through for some reason. But man, We have Chinese police in our country right now arresting people.
What do you mean?
You've not heard this.
No.
So there are, I think there was 19 different operational centers in the U.S. and Canada. And now there's a bunch in Mexico for some reason. I don't know what they're doing there, but their job is to keep an eye on Chinese expats and Chinese citizens who are living in America, not just people that have naturalized, but people who are just living here as well. And if they fuck up, say, anti-CCP stuff, they either try to arrest, like if it's a non-U.S. citizen, they try to arrest and deport them back to China, which I don't know how the fuck that's legal. And then if they're a U.S. citizen, they threaten them with, they're going to fuck up your family back in China if you don't stop. That's
So how do they get here and operate?
I don't fucking know. I don't know. But there was one up in New York, I think it was in Buffalo actually, where it was their office was right next to an Army recruiting center, right?
How are they allowed to have an office?
Well, they didn't say Chinese secret police, right? But then, you know, China's bought up farmland next to like 80 different military bases, mostly Air Force bases.
Mm-hmm. And they own the satellites too, and the cell towers. Mm-hmm.
It's very odd. Like I don't know if I've never asked this question before. I don't know how many acres of land, not military bases, and like Marshall Plan style military bases, but does the U.S. own farmland in other countries? Let's look that up. The U.S. own.
If we do, it's probably way less.
We own 41 million acres of that one. 41 million acres in the U.S. is either fully or partially owned by foreign governments. That's not great.
Mm-mm. And then Bill Gates owns a ton, and then the the Church of Latter-day Saints owns a ton as well.
Yeah, they own a lot of stuff. They own Ancestry.com.
No way.
Yeah.
That's a weird one.
They bought it so they could baptize dead people.
No, that's not real.
Oh yeah.
You can't do that.
In Mormonism you can, yeah.
You can baptize a dead person?
Yeah, I mean, that's what Jesus did when he went to Gehenna, when he went to hell. All the people that had died before him, essentially he baptized them and gave them an opportunity to accept him because Moses would be in hell then, if not, right? So it's all crazy bullshit. Yeah, it's I can't find the U.S. owning. Hold on, the U.S. The U.S. owns 9 million acres of land in other countries. That's got to be mostly, if it's only that, it's got to be mostly military bases. And 41 million acres of U.S. land, farmland, is owned by foreign countries.
Yeah, that doesn't seem like that.
This is another case of people who don't understand history being in charge. The Roman Empire came in several stages, right? There's obviously First Empire, and then Republic, and then Second Empire under Augustus, which extended out for some amount of time. And it's debatable when it ended, probably somewhere in the 5th century, where it really ended. But technically, the Byzantines considered themselves, or we call them Byzantines now, the Western Roman Empire, but they considered themselves Romans, right? If you would ask them, they would say that's Rome. But really it was a bunch of German people, Germanic, not German only. Norse, a lot of other people would have been down there, the Goths, Visigoths, all that shit. But in the same way that's happening right now, domestic labor decreased, the empire grew larger, and Germanic tribes, or as they called them, barbarians, because of their language, they spoke like this guttural bar. It sounded like that, so they called them barbarians. They came south and started to make up the majority of the working class, and then started, suggesting, hey, we should have rights. We should be involved in government. And by, the 6th, 7th, 8th century AD, the vast majority of the Western Roman Empire, there were no Italians, Romans left, right? It was Germans, barbarian tribes. And the real Roman Empire was out east in Turkey and Constantinople. So we're replaying history right now. We're allowing ourselves to be displayed. This isn't about the great replacement of white people. It has nothing to do with white people. It has everything to do with ethno-Christian European culture that made this country great, right? That made Europe great as well. There's nothing racist or xenophobic about that. That's a fucking fact. And we're replaying history right now. And instead of the barbarian hordes from the north coming in, we have fucking Muslims and Latin Americans, not necessarily Mexicans. It's more El Salvadorian, Venezuelan that are causing problems, right? We're allowing these fucking countries to send their criminal, and we're doing it even dumber than before. Back then, it was the highest performers from the Goths and Visigoths and whatever came south, smart people that like, hey, we're going to go, the land is better down there, we're going down there. That's a fucking smart move, right? And the people that took that hike and survived it are also tough as fuck, right? Great, we're getting the best of the best to come down here. Now we're selecting all the shitbags to come over here. There's nothing racist about that. That's a fact, right? El Salvador, for example, we see El Salvadorian gangs increase by 2,000% over the course of 4 years, and their crime rate goes down by 82%. Shocking, right? Of course, they're sending their best and brightest. These are just facts. This is a conversation you just can't have, right? Because people are, as you mentioned before, not afraid anymore to say what a woman is, but they're still afraid to say that European culture and American culture is superior. Period. There's no question about that.
Do you think that's fear? Because if
Yes.
you do criticize Islam, people get like stabbed in the throat.
No. I think it's fear.
Event,
I think it's less fear of physical danger than fear of being thought racist or xenophobic. And this was an operation. There's a good video from Christopher Hitchens, I think it was in 2009, talking about Islamophobia. It's like, this phrase is already being used, and their society, their culture is incompatible with ours, and the way that they're going to backdoor their way in is by accusing everybody of being racist if they don't agree, right? And you will get like right now it's just fear mongering, but at some point soon you're going to start getting arrested for it. And if you don't believe me, look at this place and this place. I gave a couple examples, and look around today. People are being arrested in Scotland and England and Ireland.
Do you think that happens here?
Not yet. Canada definitely happens,
Yeah.
but not here yet. But it will, unless something's done about it. I mean, point to the African or Arab country that's running well, right? I think you can say the rich ones. There's Kuwait, Jordan, Bahrain, UAE. Maybe Qatar, although they still harbor terrorists there. Saudi Arabia is still on the come up, but they're doing a little bit better. There is zero in Africa, right, where that culture is dominant, that are running well in a way that we would consider running well. It's like we figured it out. Like this culture it springs from ancient Greece. It's the oldest legal culture on earth, right? It's the best. There's no question about that. It has nothing to do if the Greeks had all been black, we would all be black now. People living in the dominant culture. It's just the way it is. It has nothing to do with that. There's no correlation between the skin color. It just is what it is. And that because the top performers from those countries that are primarily black or Arab are coming here because it sucks there, right? Nobody's fucking mass emigrating to Saudi Arabia. It ain't happening. So there's no purpose in even having that debate with people, though, because they're like, oh, well, fucking this or that. It's not about American exceptionalism, because we're not particularly exceptional at anything right now. Frankly, we just happen to be part of the best culture that's ever existed, and we're wasting it, and we're letting it be infiltrated right now. So, don't take credit for anything.
Well, I think that's it. To circle back to James and what he's talking about, I think that when he's criticizing the popular talking heads right now, it's exactly that. It's understanding that America is not perfect, right? Democracy is not perfect, but we're at the same time, you'll have someone like Tucker Carlson that's praising Putin or how great Russia is, or just like pointing out all of the imperfections that we have instead of just saying, how can we be better, or recognizing that we have figured it out.
Well, he's speaking about, and I'm not going to defend Tucker, he can defend himself, but he's speaking about the main cultural things that are going on in the world today. Cutting kids' dicks off, for example.
Yeah.
Not understanding basic biology. so on and so forth, respecting masculinity and biological roles for people. Russia's doing it well, we're not. That's a fact, right? Communists still suck, and Putin is a goddamn lunatic, right? I mean, he's a rational dude. He's not crazy, but he's not culturally compliant with us either, right? Like, we don't poison and throw people out of fucking windows because we dislike them politically. Well, I hope we don't, right?
That we know of.
He's an authoritarian for sure, but yeah, there's no. I certainly, and you know, to the political side, I would agree with most of what Tucker says about Russia insofar as we've done our best to try to back them into a corner for some reason. I don't know why. I think that culturally speaking, we're way more aligned, but it's convenient for our military class to have a boogeyman over there instead of just trying to make peace with those people. And because what we've done is we've turned what could be a potential friend into an enemy and driven them into China's arms. And now they're, with this BRIC stuff and all this other stuff that's happened over the past 5 years, completely unnecessary. None of this shit is necessary. We should dissolve NATO and make a political alliance with Russia, but have demands in the same way that we did of those countries, right? Knock it off with the communist bullshit. Stop fucking killing people for no reason. Blah, blah, blah. And we'll help you get your oil pipelines down into Europe. That would be a much smarter move than pretending like they're our enemy for some reason. I don't understand that. Like, they don't pose any threat to us. They couldn't even beat Ukraine. Fuck off. That's not a military threat to us anyway, so I'm ranting about nothing now. But yeah, I understand that. I just think we're in a situation now where people become experts on things very quickly, right? Like 2 weeks ago, everybody was an expert on H-1B visas. None of them have ever heard of that before. None of them have ever worked for immigration, any of that stuff. I got into arguments with people who are like, fucking, you're a mechanic, dude. Like, no offense, but I worked at goddamn immigration. I know what I'm talking about. I know what these things are. We have people, if you're compelling and you can quick cut videos together, you can seem like an expert on things you have no idea about, and it's all shallow nonsense that doesn't have, there's no fundamental backing to it, right? It's just looped talking points all the time. And if you do that a couple of times enough, you'll get a big following and people will start to trust what you say. But that doesn't mean you should be trusted to expand on any of this stuff. What the fuck is James Lindsay's degree in?
Mathematics.
Cool.
See,
I think mine is in international homeland security. So he should shut the fuck up, frankly, about that stuff and talk about math.
Well, I mean, it's not much different than the traditional pundits, right? So if you had Megyn Kelly that was on Fox, she wasn't doing all of this research. They were just feeding it to her probably 20 minutes before she went on. Yeah.
Well, she also spent like, there's a good 5-year period there where every year during Christmas time, she was like, Santa's white, he's not black. It's like, it's not real. Why are we arguing over the race of a made-up character? Although technically, Santa, you were telling me
he'd be Nordic.
He would look like me,
yeah,
frankly, which makes sense. But there's the German folklore of Saint Nick, but there's another one that predates that. That's the it's more like woo fucking goblin bullshit from the Norse people. Explain it to me.
The one that I was telling you about with the mushrooms?
Yeah.
So the other theory of Santa Claus, I always forget the name of the mushrooms, the red and white ones. You can probably look it up. So they are extremely toxic and poisonous.
Fly agaric?
Sure.
Amanita muscaria.
Yes, that one. So
Amanita muscaria.
Yes. Super toxic.
Just like, imagine the Smurfs. It looks like that.
Yeah.
Keep going.
So you can't eat them by themselves, even for psychedelic effect. You'll probably die. Yeah. So if a reindeer eats them, no problem. And they'll urinate the compounds to where you can drink it and then you will have a psychedelic effect. They're very intense. So what would happen is this old man, like the shaman,
So an old Viking drank piss.
would drink reindeer pee.
Oh my God.
He would have visions, and then the families would all be in their yurts because it's cold, and he would go through to the yurt and give the gift of foresight to the family, right? So he would be gifting them, and that was Santa Claus.
So a dude tripped out on psilocybin pee. Is just cruising around telling people their future.
Yeah, giving them the gift of the next year. So he would have been white. To me, that's way more believable.
Well, I mean, I don't remember what the Saint Nick one is.
I don't
from
either.
German culture, but I don't remember. I think it was an old man that was just doing the three wise men ritual, right? The gifts. I actually know some families who do that. They're religious, obviously. I'm not particularly religious myself, but they only give their kids 3 gifts for Christmas every year because that's what Jesus got, right? Like, oh, that actually kind of makes sense. It makes a whole lot more sense than the goddamn Easter Bunny. That is, I actually like that one better because it's so stupid.
Well, Easter Bunny, I don't know how that became a Christian.
Well, I mean, it's a fucking, well, it was
a fertility ritual, yeah.
It's the fertility ritual before the spring solstice, and it's around the spring solstice, and it's, I get it, bunnies have been associated with fertility for as long as I can remember, historically speaking. The egg part, I don't know if that means like your fucking eggs.
Yeah.
But it's like, and then we send children out looking for them. That's the part that I just don't get. Right. Like I guess these things develop over hundreds of years probably. So I guess it makes sense. But
they all kind of get meshed together. But then you have to decide if you're going to tell your kid that one of them is real, or do you tell them that all of them are real? So
wait, I didn't know this is part of it.
What do you mean?
What are you talking about?
Like, if you commit to Santa, do you have to commit to the Easter Bunny? And then do you have to commit to the Tooth Fairy? Or do you get to pick and choose?
Well, I don't even know where the Tooth Fairy came from.
It's probably something dark, I'd imagine. I think a lot of those things are. So the way that I explain it to my oldest is, Middle Ages. It's probably something creepy.
Children in England were instructed to burn their baby teeth on pain of spending eternity searching for the baby teeth in the afterlife. Fear of witches was another reason to burn or bury the teeth. In medieval Europe, it was thought that a witch could assume total power over someone if they were to obtain one of their teeth. Same with fingernails, by the way. A lot of people burned their fingernails back then. And in Italy, I don't know about the rest of Europe, but in Italy they did. Yeah. They would say that somebody could make evil on you if they came into possession of your fingernails or toenails or hair or teeth or something like that. That's fucking stupid. But we're weird people, you know.
Now you put it under your pillow and you
I
offer
don't.
it.
No. No, if I put something under my pillow with the expectation of somebody coming into my house, it would be an ambush. I would be set up in the corner of the room with a rifle, and they would die.
You never put your teeth under your pillow when you were little?
No, my parents would not have allowed that. Or maybe we did. I don't remember. I remember everything. I don't remember doing that. Anyways, this has been a fun conversation. We talked a lot about how I hate everything and everybody. You have anything to add before we get out of here?
I do not. No, this is a great little history lesson.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Well, I really encourage people to understand the root of things, first principles, we call them, because otherwise somebody can come along with a new idea that sounds good. That idea sounds good, right? But the baseline is, for us now, it's the Constitution, right? Because that's the amalgamation of all these learned lessons that we've had. And if it doesn't match up with that, then it's a bad idea. We know that now. It's like, it can be easy to hear a new idea and be like, oh, that's a good idea, right? But I highly recommend using the Constitution and its background information as a point of reference, because there's been thousands of years of people going from slaves to free people, and that process matters and how it happened. is also a way to make yourself resilient and insulate yourself from future tyranny. The end.
The end.
Tell everybody where they can find you.
You can go to chattingwithcandice.com and all my socials, pod, everything's there.
Sweet. Well, thanks for coming.
Yeah.
Well, I actually came here, but thanks for doing the show.
Yeah.
All right, see you now.